Heaven sent.
The year was 1999. The Sopranos had just dropped on HBO, Eminem released his critically acclaimed Slim Shady LP, and the lovable sponge from Under the Sea had made his primetime television debut. In other words, there was a lot of great media coming out at this time, and while the rest of the world were preparing for a possible economic collapse at the turn of a new year, the Wachowski siblings were hard at work in releasing one of the most influential action films of all time. With a unique combination of mind-bending visuals and sci-fi influence, The Matrix was a film unlike anything ever seen before. It was dark, beautifully shot, and included some very thought-provoking concepts on society at large. Best of all, it included one of the most iconic moments in all of action television, that being the bullet time effect. And for anyone that had watched this film back when it was first released, I'm sure you'll remember just how unbelievably cool this scene was to experience. I mean, we had seen slow-mo in plenty of other films before it, but this was next level. So much so that it literally shifted the course of media. Raising the bar in terms of special effects, its influence quickly spilled over into much more than just movies. With the video game industry taking note of this newfound love for slow-motion combat, many developers began to incorporate these effects in their games, which in turn spawned a litany of legendary IPs. So in today's video, we're going to be covering the widespread influence of bullet time in gaming, taking things back to its very first introduction, all the way to its present day usage. So without further ado, make sure to do your stretches and carry plenty of ammo, because we've got a lot to unpack on this action-packed journey. So let's begin. If you're a regular viewer of my channel, then you can probably recall how often we find ourselves reminiscing over the 6th generation of gaming. The PlayStation 2, OG Xbox, and Nintendo GameCube were providing a next level experience for gamers at that time. And with the next gen hardware providing more than enough resource for developers to make their wildest dreams come true, the creativity began to shine in full force. Games such as Final Fantasy X were now able to incorporate lifelike cutscenes to stun their players, not to mention titles such as Grand Theft Auto 3 making use of massive open worlds and realistic level design. Games were bigger, badder, and more fun than ever before, and the mystery of what was next to come kept players both excited and amazed. So with the massive success of The Matrix and its beloved bullet time sequences, an ambitious development studio by the name of Remedy Entertainment were eager to bring these slow motion concepts into the virtual world. Now this wouldn't come easy, given the fact that the devs were going to need some believable physics and attention to detail in order for this game to achieve its desired effect. I mean, think about it. If you're slowing down time in-game, players are going to want to see the bullets traveling from their weapons, bodies reacting to said weapon's impact, and of course, destructible environments. This meant they were going to need to build their own engine from scratch, later naming it Max Effects. With this engine, they were able to produce detailed effects such as level destruction, smoke, and even muzzle flashes. And after seeing it in practice, it was no secret that this game was going to be something special. After keeping a low profile in the game's development for half a decade, Max Payne officially shook the world of gaming on July 25th, 2001. Assuming the role of Max on his blood-soaked quest for revenge, you'll shoot and dodge your way through endless hordes of New York City criminals, with a litany of secrets to uncover and one-liners to drop. This game was everything a combat fanatic could ever dream of, and much like the standard for action films were raised after The Matrix debut, the same could be said for Max Payne. While the repetitive nature of Max Payne's gameplay would have been nothing too special at that time, the introduction of its dynamic bullet time system made the possibilities seem endless for each firefight. Do I want to bust through the door and hit them with a front-facing dive, or maybe slide across the table guns blazing John Woo style? Players were constantly presented with a variety of ways to waste their enemy, and it only got better as the guns got bigger. I personally remember getting this game as a gift for Christmas back in 2002, and as a kid who loved virtual carnage, this game was mind-blowing to witness. No detail was spared in the visual production. I mean, just fire a bullet and hit the pause button real quick. This will freeze the gameplay and begin panning the camera around Max's environment, in which you can see the muzzle flash, shells ejecting from the chamber, and the bullet itself traveling. It really was something else. I mean, even the engraving on Max's weapons could be seen. This level of detail made the combat feel incredibly immersive. And for a tale as tragic as Max's, you'll definitely take pleasure in seeing the detailed demise of each foe he comes into contact with. Now, given the fact that the bullet time mechanic was heavily inspired by The Matrix, the devs at Remedy decided to pay homage to its influence with a variety of Easter eggs. You have the detonation scene in the subway, referencing to the spinning elevator door found in the film, and a recreation of the lobby scene, later found in the Nothing to Lose chapter. There were even some early mods for the game, which took that very same scene from The Matrix and replicated it in-game. At the end of the day, Remedy set out to create an iconic experience for action gaming fans all over the world, and they achieved just that. But their reach went much further than your everyday consumer, as the industry began to take note of its influence. And much like the trend of open world gaming began to take shape in the early 2000s, so did bullet time. But for one to stay relevant in the wake of competition, it's going to take an effort to separate yourself from the pack. With this next game on our list, I personally have always found it to be one of the more underrated of its era. So for a more unique approach to the bullet time mechanic, let's travel a bit forward into the year of 2002, with the Namco classic of Dead to Rights. When it comes to the legendary development studio of Namco, I've grown to have quite a soft spot for their brand. Not only have they been responsible for my personal favorite fighting series of all time, but they were also one of the reasons I had even began making content. What I'm trying to say is, I'm a big fan of Namco's work, and back when they were doing their thing on the 6th gen consoles, I was a loyal consumer to anything they were putting out. After the release of Max Payne, it was as if a shockwave of influence had been sent throughout the world of gaming. And with a newfound lust for slow motion firefights and deadpan one-liners, Namco were ready to take these concepts for a spin, spawning one of the greatest action series of the early 2000s, Dead to Rights. Now, some people may speculate that Dead to Rights was biting the style of Max Payne a bit too hard, you know, with the whole misfit cop on a quest for revenge premise, but where Dead to Rights had truly separated itself was in its gameplay. While Max Payne had this very dark, cynical, and hopeless feel to it, the tone of Dead to Rights have felt more like a B-movie style action film, and I mean that in the best way possible. It's a game that puts a lot of emphasis on the action, and offers a whole lot more to the mechanics than just slow motion shooting and dives. Finding yourself without a weapon, no problem, as Jack can virtually disarm any baddie in his wake. Need to make a statement on the battlefield? How about tossing that fire extinguisher at a group of enemies and starting a little fireworks show at their expense? The variety of options you were given in each fight kept every engagement fresh, and with the lock-on system being implemented in the gunplay, it allowed more freedom to the player to make use of these mechanics. The addition of bullet time to all of these features made the combat that much more satisfying, and pairing that with the arcadey nature of the game's atmosphere was a hell of a good time. Sure, the plot was paper thin, and maybe the main protagonist is the only character with any personality, but it was effective in what it came to do. You shoot, jab, and bite your way through waves of bad guys, hoping to bring justice home in a blood-soaked paper bag. It's a game that I've always remembered very fondly, and I can even recall my childhood friends and I reenacting a lot of these disarm moves on each other whenever we played guns. But the influence of bullet time in gaming hadn't stopped there, as it was just beginning to make its rounds in the industry. So with The Matrix being almost solely responsible for the latest trends in gaming at that time, it would only make sense for them to hop on the gravy train and get to producing their very own game as well, right? And while it may be controversial as to whether or not this game was actually any good, maybe we could just take a look for ourselves. So without further ado, grab your trusty late 90s trench coat and your darkest pair of gas station sunglasses, as we prepare to enter The Matrix. Given the critical success of the Matrix film, it was a no-brainer that Warner Brothers were more than willing to continue funding the series for a plethora of sequels. The second installment, titled The Matrix Reloaded, released just shy of 4 years after its predecessor, and alongside it came a 6th gen exclusive, further expanding the film's narrative. Enter the Matrix had released on May 15, 2003, giving fans of the series and gamers alike a first-hand look into the world of both Niobe and Ghost. While these characters played more of a supporting role in the movie, they found themselves to be the main focus within the game, filling in plot holes and giving fans a chance to recreate some of their favorite moments from the film. Now, to create a gaming experience on par with that of the films would be nothing short of a challenge, especially on hardware such as the PS2. Talks of the game's development at first began shortly after the first movie was released, with the Wachowski siblings being in talks with both Konami and Shiny Entertainment in developing it. With Konami eventually opting out of this deal, the ball was now in Shiny's court, with the game officially being announced under their umbrella at E3 of 2000. Now, going back and doing a little research on the game's development, it's obvious that they were really aiming to create something cinematic for their players, with full motion capture being used for both Nairobi and Ghost, as well as professional choreographers and kung fu experts to create a realistic, yet fluid combat system. It had been roughly 22 years since I had played this game for myself, being that my only experience was on a Friday night after a Blockbuster run. So giving it another playthrough with fresh eyes in present day, I've got to say that the extra effort in motion capture definitely shows. The combat feels very open in terms of variety. Whether you're punching, diving, or running up a wall, pretty much every acrobatic maneuver you've seen in the films are present here in the game. The problem is that sometimes it feels scripted, as if your opponents are completely helpless to your every attack. I mean, you can literally just mow down an entire crew of security with just your fist. And while the hand-to-hand combat is finely tuned, I just couldn't say the same for the gunplay. The targeting system is finicky and somewhat random. I kinda just found myself spamming the fire button and letting the auto target do the rest of the work. I mean, I get that they want you to be pulling off sweet bullet time moves and such while you fire, but it just doesn't have the same impact as the hand-to-hand stuff did. It's also strange that while the motion capture was so well done for things such as the combat, the characters' running and climbing animations just look goofy. But anyways, the game itself is actually pretty entertaining, and I found myself enjoying it much more than I had remembered. One of the more beloved aspects of the game was in its hacking feature, giving players a more immersive approach to entering cheat codes, as well as a way to uncover other tasty extras that can be found in-game. The feature will have you feeling like a certified cyberboss, and if there's anything this game does well, it's fanfare. You can tell there was a lot of effort into making sure that this game carried the same atmosphere and excitement that the films had. The visuals, while a bit dated, were definitely something to praise for their time. And while the gameplay can be a bit goofy to witness, it doesn't fall too far from the surreal nature of the films. Overall, it was a solid effort in furthering the reach of a beloved franchise. It was yet another example of how popular the trend of bullet time was becoming in gaming. So before we move on to discuss the other ways this mechanic had impacted gaming, I thought we'd take a brief run at the mechanic's influence over the next couple of years. So allow me to briefly step back and showcase some of the greatest bullet time mechanics of that era. So for now, enjoy the fireworks, and we'll be back in just a moment. While the use of bullet time began to transition into the 7th gen of gaming, with titles such as Stranglehold, a new perspective on the mechanic would soon begin to flood one of the most popular genres of that time, that being first-person shooters. While the majority of bullet time experiences were found in games of the third-person genre, the demand for FPS gaming was steadily on the rise, and with its rise in popularity came an influx of different IPs, all with the hope of becoming a new household favorite. With franchises such as Halo, Counter-Strike, and Call of Duty having the FPS market in a firm squeeze, it was going to take some out-of-the-box concepts to separate a new IP from the already thriving ones. So what can make the run-and-gun experience more exciting for gamers? Well, slow motion had typically worked well in the realms of third-person titles, so why not give it a shot in a new perspective? So it became the motto for many a developer, and overall, we're met with some pretty solid results. So in order of release, let's cover a few of the most beloved FPS games that made use of bullet time mechanics, starting with one of the greatest experiences I've ever personally had, in the 2005 action horror classic of Fear. Developed by Monolith Studios and released on the Xbox 360, PS3, and Windows, Fear took the concept of first-person combat and shifted it into a whole new ballgame, with the game's narrative following a special military unit that deals in the paranormal, Its unique atmosphere is felt right as soon as the first cutscene begins. Now to pull the curtain back a little bit, this game had set the standard for PC performance at its time, mostly due to its incredible physics engine and realistic particle effects. And pairing these features with the game's bullet time mechanic known as Reflex made for some truly cinematic firefights. The combat mechanics themselves were incredibly fluid as well, and Fear offered some of the best enemy AI even to this day. Enemies will often react to events in real time, calling out for help and even counting the number of squad mates down. They'll pop out for a couple of shots, then juke around a corner to throw you off their scent. This kept the tension in game at an all-time high. It made those slow motion sequences all the more necessary in surviving. You'll make use of the reflex mechanic a lot in this game, but it just never seems to get old. I typically found myself planning ahead on my attacks, always looking for the coolest way to drop my enemies. There's even a lot of videos on YouTube showcasing these intense gunfights, which only further proves just how epic they truly felt. Fear is a classic in the realms of first-person shooters, and is by far one of the greatest games to make use of the bullet time mechanic. But as far as this next game on our list goes, it takes the concept of time manipulation and carries it over to the next level, so much so that we're not just going to slow down time, we're going to straight up manipulate it. So let's jump a bit forward into the year of 2007 and cover the underrated classic of Time Shift. While the majority of games thus far have made use of time-slowing mechanics, Time Shift allows players to pause, rewind, and slow down time in order to get the upper hand in battle. Set in a dystopian near-future setting, you take on the role of an unnamed man, in pursuit of a mad scientist that is manipulating timelines in order to gain power. These time-shifting powers are given by an alpha suit, with the secondary beta suit being used by our main character. And the sheer amount of opportunity that these powers open up on the battlefield seem endless. You can manipulate time in order to steal weapons, solve puzzles, or even finish off an entire battalion of unsuspecting foes. And while it plays much like your typical FPS shooter, these welcome features were more than enough to separate this game from the rest. It technically wasn't the first of its kind by any means, but it definitely presented such mechanics with more polish than ever before. And its dystopian, sci-fi setting is definitely something to appreciate for all of you level design buffs out there. And while we're on the topic of wonderful level designs, our next topic of discussion had some of my favorite locales to explore back in the day. That was not much of a segue there. But anyways, I'm talking about Fallout 3. Yeah, the game that pretty much everyone in 2008 was obsessed with, and I was right there with them. And while I was out fighting rad roaches and drinking my weight in Nuka-Cola, I had quickly fallen in love with its VAT system. The VAT system was essentially a mechanic that allowed you to select which area of your target you'd like to come in contact with higher percentage targets having a greater chance of doing critical damage. And upon landing a kill shot in VATs, you would be met with some incredibly satisfying bullet time goodness. That's truly beautiful. It was simple yet effective, being part of the reason this game was so damn good. And since we covered a good bit of some of the 7th gen's greatest FPS games with bullet time, I'd like to circle back to those tried and true third-person slugfest and showcase a couple more of the most memorable. So without further ado, let's begin. Now before we tie things off and bring the storied history of bullet time's influence to a close, I'd like to briefly touch on the many different ways this mechanic has been used in modern day gaming. From what originally began as a way to produce a cinematic and engaging experience for fans of the shooter genre, quickly evolved into something much more throughout time, beginning with Rockstar's newfound take on it. Now it's no secret that Rockstar had quite the history with bullet time, given the fact that they had published the Max Payne series. So when it came to implementing this mechanic into their weapon swap system, it was surely a match made in heaven. Bygone were the days of your character just standing there awkwardly as you swapped weapons in the middle of a gunfight. With games such as Red Dead Redemption 2 and GTA 5, you can now slow down time to make your decision, choose your weapon, and seamlessly plug back into the action without missing a beat. This newfound mechanic was truly a game changer for both series, and it even transitioned well into the 2022 remaster of GTA's Definitive Edition. Another great example of these mechanics in present day would be the 2009 action platformer of Katana Zero. Taking inspiration from the beloved Hotline Miami series, this game takes 2D katana-wielding combat to the next level. When finding yourself in a pinch, players can slow down time and deflect incoming fire. And while the mechanic itself can be quite limited for use, it makes for one hell of a satisfying rebuttal against enemy attacks. Fighting games have even begun to implement these bullet time-esque mechanics over time, with the Tekken Rage Art system, as well as Mortal Kombat's X-Ray moves being great examples. And as far as RPGs go, the critically acclaimed Clair Obscura Expedition 33 does a hell of a job at combining these mechanics into a turn-based combat system. It's honestly mind-blowing to look back on just how far the history of bullet time in gaming goes, and just the sheer number of different games it's been included in. To think that a blockbuster film such as The Matrix would have such a lasting effect on the world of gaming is pretty incredible. And there's honestly plenty of other games I could have included in this list. So if you guys remember any of the games I've forgotten to mention, please leave a comment down below. Maybe I could even do a part 2 on the series. But for now, I think it's time for me to wrap things up and get ready to kick off the summer with our next exploration video. So while I get to work on that, I hope you guys had an amazing time watching this one, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. Take care, stay safe, and have a blessed day, all. Peace out, guys.